Episode 13. The next day, there are multiple events going on, so the representatives split up to make appearances at all of them. Krusty attends an event with other knights where sparring matches take place. He suggests that whoever is the strongest amongst the knights be rewarded with accompanying Lanessia to tonight's party. Of course, Krusty is stronger than all of the other NPCs, so he easily wins the competition. Lanessia gets pretty annoyed by Krusty, but he seems to understand the kind of person she is, so they still kinda get along. Over to the noobs who keep losing fights and can't figure out why. Meanwhile, Michitaka is attending his meeting where they discuss how the new food is helping the peoples of the land's markets flourish. The problem is that now there are more goods needing to be transported, but the caravans keep getting attacked by goblins. To circumvent these attacks, they explain that they're looking to start transporting goods by sea instead. Akatsuki reports back that the people of the land seem to see the adventurers as potential enemies, but they don't mean any harm yet. She also mentions overhearing that the Izumo Knights are missing. As soon as she says this, their talk is interrupted by a surge of magic, and a strange man named Reagan appears looking to talk with Shiro. Episode 14 is a bit of a long one, so I'll try and get through it fast. Reagan identifies himself as the Mage of Mural Lake. Shiro explains that his name had come up a lot in town rumors and descriptions of quests. They figured that this was all just flavor text added by the devs and the character didn't actually exist. The two of them continue on to discuss different classes of magic. There is the Action class, Combat class, Operation class, Tactical class, Strategy class, National Defense class, Continent class, and finally World class. These are ordered by how much of an area of effect they have. For example, an Action class spell affects the least amount with it only influencing one action like a swing of a sword. Combat alters the course of a single battle. Operation class spells can affect multiple battles at a time. Tactical class spells are capable of conquering an entire enemy castle with just one hit. Shiro points out that the game has never had spells that powerful though. But anyways, National Defense affects the outcome of a nation, Continent class the outcome of the entire continent, bringing us finally to World class, which would be defined as a spell capable of controlling the laws, fate, or the very existence of an entire world. Reagan tells him that there's only one world class spell known right now, and it's been cast 3 times throughout history. The spell is called the World Fraction Global Enchantment, and is also responsible for the apocalypse. If this is the spell that caused the apocalypse, then Shiro's first question is what happened the first 2 times it was cast. Well, according to Reagan, 350 years ago, the world was far from prosperous. During that time, humans, elves, dwarves, and alves lived together. The elves were magical inventors, but that power was their undoing. They were despised for their monopoly over magical technology, and since they were such a small nation, the other races eradicated them. This led to the 6 bent princesses, known as the Luquenji, being born. According to the tale, the 6 of them didn't know each other and weren't working together. They were all elf women though, and were pissed at the destruction of their race and culture. Independently, but also simultaneously, they all swore revenge. Each took different routes to achieving this revenge, which plunged the entire world into chaos. Although their actions weren't enough, and all 6 of them were on the verge of defeat, leading to the first casting of the World Fraction. The technology and principles used in the first casting still remain a mystery, but the casting led to the genesis of the demi-humans in the world. Reagan speculates that since there was so much war, it led to an abundance of souls inhabiting the world. It's possible that these souls were what was used to create the demi-humans. More war was waged against the demi-humans also, leaving everything in a dark age. Even though the Luquenji were defeated, it seems their dreams of revenge had come to pass. To combat all of the new demi-humans, the survivors used elf secrets to create new races and add allies to their numbers. This led to all of the cat people, wolf fangs, foxtails, and robed ones joining the ranks against the demi-humans. The event also coincided with the creation of the Precursors. Precursors are the most powerful NPCs who are just as strong as adventurers. Back in the game's lore, they were referenced as legendary heroes. They backburner the Precursors for now though to talk instead about the souls, which falls under something called spirit theory. Because souls were spurring on the creation of the demi-humans, the more demi-humans they killed, the more souls there were floating around. This basically turns into the demi-humans reincarnating, or from the game's perspective, respawning. Jump ahead 60 years after the first World Fraction, and 240 years from the present. At this point, all of humanity is on the verge of defeat against the demi-humans. This led to a divine summoning spell being used used, which was also the second casting of the World Fraction. It caused messengers of God to appear, which later became known as the Adventurers. Reagan wanted to talk to Shiro because he recognizes him as an archmage that appeared in their history books 98 years ago. This makes Shiro realize that 5 minutes of playing time is equal to an hour of game time. In other words, 1 day in the game is 2 real-world hours. And if you did the math, which I didn't cause fuck that, you'd find that 98 years for them would be a little more than 8 years in the real world, which is when Shiro had first started playing Elder Tale. The time also lines up for the second casting of the World Fraction because that's when the open beta was officially launched. Next, they talk about the spirit, which is the mystical energy that animates both humans and demi-humans. The spirit is divided into 2 segments, the psyche and the anima. Psyche is the energy that animates the mind as well as magic, commonly referred to as MP. Anima, on the other hand, animates the body and is known as HP. When somebody is defeated in battle, they can't move, but the mind remains healthy. This leads to the anima and the psyche being split. The psyche becomes trapped in darkness because the information, such as light, that flows through the mind to the body is cut off. The next step is anima dispersal. Resurrection magic is used on corpses in this state, taking the anima that has been dispersed and reconstructing it. The downside is that the resurrection is never perfect, which leads to the loss of experience points afterwards. While resurrection does work on people of the land, if they aren't resurrected in time, they perish for good. On the other hand, for adventurers, once the anima dispersal is complete, the body decomposes into particles. The psyche then uses its power to transport the adventurer to the cathedral, similar to what happens with demi-humans. Shiro explains that while playing the game, the player is like the psyche and the character is like the anima. If the character died, it only meant losing some experience points, and since the psyche couldn't be affected, the player was fine. Now that the psyche and the anima of the players are united, so are their memories and experience points. Thus bringing us to the conclusion that dying in the game could result in a loss of not only experience points, but actual memories because the two are intertwined. But even with this realization, it's not clear how much repeated deaths would affect you. It could be something as simple as a little forgetfulness or deja vu at times, but you also could forget about the real world altogether. Shiro and Akatsuki agree that it's probably best to keep this information to themselves for now. Anyways, in the last couple of scenes, Midori finally builds up the courage to tell the noobs why they're getting their asses handed to them. Episode 15. They decide they should get more well acquainted with each other and their abilities. Once they get talking, everybody realizes how much they can combo their moves together and strategize their positioning. Now that they have a coherent plan in the fighting, they are finally able to clear out the skeletons. We get a quick scene showing that Krusty is starting to grow on Lanesia. Later on, we see that one of the girls in the noobs group named Isuzu has started to get along well with Rundlehouse. They will have to part ways once the training is over, so she decides she'll add him to her friend list. But we see that for some unknown reason, the system won't allow her to. Jump ahead to the next day where an army of Sahagin, which are basically budget murlocs, attack the shoreline where the camp is being held. Episode 16. It's not just the Sahagin that are on the move, but there is also an army of a few thousand goblins nearby. After reporting this to Shiro, an emergency meeting is called by the Round Table. During the meeting, they estimate that roughly 10,000 goblins are on the move. Shiro speculates that this could be because of an event called the Demon King's Return. Twice a year, a Goblin King is crowned, and players are given a week to defeat him before it happens. This was an easy way to get loot, so there's never been a time where the Goblin King was successfully crowned. Although the admins did mention that if the players ever failed, then the Goblin tribes would unite and engage everybody in a massive army. When it was still a game, everybody recalls a powerful army called the Izumo Knights. These knights were people of the land, but were stronger than the adventurers, and acted as the NPC's trump card. There are said to be 13 bands of knights around the world, and whenever they get into a fight, it's to determine the fate of the world. Because they can't confirm that such an army exists, they have to figure out how to ensure the people of the land aren't killed by the goblins. Lanesia's dad stops by to give her the bad news about the goblin army, and also to inform her that he's going to leave to defend their hometown of Maihama from the invasion. A smaller force is then spotted by the training party, and Nyanta speculates that they're moving to attack the town of Choshi for supplies. Meanwhile, Shiro summons Sojiro to help defend the Palace of Eternal Ice if it gets attacked. With fighting on the horizon, Shiro feels it's necessary to tell everybody about the possible memory loss upon death. Krusty had underwent combat training with his guild when they first arrived and died a couple of times, so he can confirm that afterwards there were indeed memories missing. It's hard to know exactly which memories were lost, but he does know that the memories were from the real world. The training party decide to go help Choshi, but they come across a village that had already fallen to the goblins. They reconvene with the other adventurers and decide that instead of defending the town, they will attack the goblins head on. Episode 17. The people of the land are trying to figure out how to handle the situation without help from the adventurers. It's gonna be a little bit tough though, because apparently all of the Izumo knights have vanished from the land, and none of them know why. Back over to the training group, who launch surprise attacks on the goblins, while Nyanta and Natsugu take higher level members to fight the bulk of the force. Finally realizing that the people of the land are gonna need the help of the adventurers in this matter, everybody has a conference. Tensions rise when both sides are withholding information, and the people of the land insinuate that the adventurers are obligated to help because they're so strong. Shiro had assigned Michitaka to play the role of being against sending adventurers. He says that they can't just be seen as guard dogs at the command of the people of the land. It seems that the negotiations had broken down until Lanessia makes her entrance. She reveals the truth about the missing Izumo Knights and requests that Krusty take her to Akihabara. Once there, she wishes to raise a volunteer force of adventurers to help them. At this point, she's kind of acting as a bridge in the divide between the two sides. She is requesting aid from the adventurers, but she's doing it in a respectful way that gives them the freedom to decline. With that settled, Krusty and Lanessia head back to Akihabara while being accompanied by Shiro and Akatsuki. Episode 18. Everyone arrives in Akihabara, but Krusty has to go handle some guild stuff, so Lanessia gets stuck with Shiro. They get her some new clothes and stick her in front of the adventurers in Akihabara to convince them to fight. She gives a rousing speech or whatever, plus she looks pretty hot in her new outfit, so she wins over the neckbeards. To stay ahead of the goblin forces, they use their prototype steamship called the Okopete, with Krusty leading those forces. Meanwhile, Shiro takes another force of 1,200 adventurers to set up a strategic headquarters in the Midra Equestrian Park. Back on over to Michitaka, who discusses a divide that's forming between the League and the Corwin family. The people of the land think that Lanessia is trying to secure more power for Maihama with the help of Akihabara, but they just backburner that for now, along with the relations between them and the adventurers until the goblins are dealt with. Meanwhile, the training group had dealt with the first wave well enough, but there are still more coming. And in the last scene, we see Krusty's force getting ready to engage the goblins. Episode 19. Krusty and his men go and engage the main goblin force. We see that a system of communications has been set up so that Shiro can issue orders to whoever he needs to. Meanwhile, the next wave is coming at the training party, but it's more than they expected, so they have to call Shiro for help. He commands the steamship Okopete to go help them. We get a fight sequence where the training squad shows off everything that they learned in the dungeon. Minori is acting as the strategist, just like Shiro used to do when he was playing the game. Shiro was abnormally good at this though, being able to make insanely accurate predictions as far as 30 seconds ahead of time, which they called full control encounter. The Okopete is still an hour out, so they have to hold off the Saugin as well as stray goblins until it arrives. Things seem to be going relatively well until a pack of direwolves show up with even more goblins. Toya is getting focused by too many enemies, and none of their healing can keep up. Just before he's killed, Rundlehouse jumps in to distract them so he doesn't die. After he is fatally wounded in the fight, Isuzu comes clean about her learning that the reason he couldn't join her friends list is because he's actually an NPC. It looks like he's a goner with none of their spells being able to work, so they call Shiro as one last ditch effort. Episode 20. After hearing the bad news, Shiro rushes to get to them on his griffin. The Okopete arrives to relieve the forces on the beach, while at the same time Shiro gets to the kids. Shiro says that he's going to cast a new spell, but makes the kids swear that they can't tell anybody about it. He starts out using a spell to redistribute all of the party's MP equally amongst the members. Next, he uses Revival Incense, which brings Rundlehouse back to life, but it will only last 3 minutes. Once he had regained consciousness, Shiro presents a contract to him. This contract entails Rundlehouse becoming a part of Log Horizon. By doing this, Rundlehouse will be granted the status of adventurer. Similar to Nyanta's cooking, Shiro had formed the contract with the best paper and ink in the game. That, combined with him being a level 90 scribe, allowed him to create a new kind of magic. Rundlehouse signs a contract which turns him into an official Log Horizon adventurer. And while all that's happening, Krusty continues fighting against the goblin forces, where Lanessia is surprised to see a more vicious side of him. Now we hop on over to the cathedral, where Rundlehouse now respawns since he's an adventurer and is greeted by Isuzu and a new game HUD. Episode 21. Now we're gonna jump ahead 1 month. where we learn that the Goblin King is still at large, but that's been backburnered so that they can focus on their relations with the people of the land. The Round Table has signed basic trade and peace treaties with the Easel's League of Freedom cities, giving them their first ally. Quests are also back on the table to give adventurers incentive to keep the goblins at bay. While out walking, Shiro overhears a woman telling a story to a group of children about how the adventurers had saved the city. He thinks nothing of it until she starts telling Rundle House's story and how he was changed into an adventurer. At the end of the story, she foreshadows that something happens to the wizard who had converted him, but then leaves before he could say anything to her. Reagan and Shiro meet again, where Reagan tells him that he knows about the new magic Shiro had created. Just recently, Reagan had noticed a similar phenomenon happening in the West, meaning that another adventurer had figured out how to make new magic as well. Minami is another one of the major adventure cities to the west, but nobody has really heard what's been going on there. Reagan also informs him that there was an event that happened in the west similar to the Demon King's return, called the Demon Festival of Suzaku Gate. Apparently, the Izumo Knights were involved in the event. We get a short look at a party where Lanesia sends us into a flashback. Now that there's an alliance with the Round Table, Sergiat wants to send an ambassador to stay in Akihabara, and Lanesia seems like the best one for the job. During the party, Shiro and Akatsuki have a little moment or something where they dance. The newly appointed Ambassador Lanesia goes back to Akihabara with everybody after that. To avoid panic, the adventurers are told about the loss of memory on death through a rumor instead of making some sort of grand announcement. Now we jump ahead a bit more where things have calmed down and Marielle wants to throw a festival to celebrate autumn, and they're gonna call it the Scale Festival. Episode 22 is pretty filler-esque, so I'll try and get through it fast. Everybody is busy setting up for the big festival. Shiro has been busy with paperwork and learning, so Akatsuki takes him out to blow off some steam. Minori drops in on them, and it turns into a bit of a rivalry with both of them wanting to spend time with Shiro. To keep them happy, he goes out with both of them to a cake-eating contest. They end up eating too much, yada yada yada. Later that night, him and Akatsuki end up talking, where Minori comes across the two of them and realizes that Akatsuki is crushing on Shiro. She's heartbroken, but she'll get over it. Plus, she's in middle school. Don't be weird and start shipping it. The writers are never gonna let it happen. Go make fanfiction or whatever it is you guys do, and in the meantime, keep your history clear. Love you. Stay safe. Episode 23. On the second day of the festival, we see that the lack of fucking amongst the characters is starting to make sexual tensions rise. Marielle has been crushing on Natsuko for a while, and Henrietta, for whatever reason, flipped the switch, and now she wants to fuck Shiro also. I just want to point out that Natsuko has been horny this entire season, and as soon as a big titty guild leader likes him, now he's oblivious to it. Come on, fuck off, man. But anyways, we also get a flashback of Minori, who had switched her subclass to Apprentice, which allows her to work under Shiro as her teacher. With him as her teacher, she'll level up faster and learn his skills at an accelerated rate. Later that night, the atmosphere is changing, and the people of the land seem to be getting more confrontational. Shiro deducts that something is off, and Akihabara might be under attack. Episode 24. After they look into the altercations that have been happening recently, they find that it all started within the last 2 days. Shiro speculates that a group of NPCs could be trying to hurt the Round Table's reputation. We then see a high-ranking lord from the west, named Lord Malves, who shows up in Akihabara. Shiro identifies him as a potential threat, because he believes that the attacks on the Round Table's credibility are likely coming from the west. He thinks that their endgame is to interfere with the Easel Round Table treaties. If they succeed, then Easel can't monopolize all of the benefits that Akihabara has to offer. When he can't come up with anything, Sojiro and his groupies give him an idea on how to handle the situation. Over to Lanesia, who's throwing a banquet to thank the adventurers for their help against the Goblin King. Lord Malves shows up, and it's revealed that his guards are adventurers from the west. He's a huge dick and starts stirring things up, saying that commoners shouldn't be able to attend the same events as nobles. Lanesia is trying her best to appease the dickhead, but tensions are rapidly rising. He then accuses her of misplacing a letter he had sent them requesting that they prepare a warehouse for goods he was transporting so they don't spoil. Meanwhile, Shiro sends Sojiro and his girls on patrols to handle the disturbances. I guess the logic is something along the lines of, it's hard to be mad when there's a bunch of hot girls trying to calm you down. Once Shiro hears that Lord Malves is at Lanesia's banquet, he decides to go pay them a visit. Episode 25. Shiro knows that Lord Malves never sent any letters, so he fabricates one with his scribe ability, leaving Malves confused. Michitaka then steps in to offer up the Marine Agency warehouses for them to use instead. This forces Malves' hand, revealing that there actually was no cargo. He was just trying to make Lanesia look bad. He storms out, and we see the festival continuing into the night. Minori has been noticing people talking badly about Shiro, because he doesn't go out much, so people don't know what to think of him. She goes to talk with him and wants to know if it bothers him that he's perceived as some sort of villain mastermind that's always up to something. He's well aware of it though and doesn't fucking care. As long as his goals are accomplished, that's all that matters. Later on, while alone, Shiro is confronted by Dariella, who is the woman that was telling the Rundle House story to the kids. She appears to be an NPC, but really it's just a disguise, and Shiro can see through it instantly. She disables the disguise, revealing her true identity as Nerea, who is the guild master of Plant Huyeden. Plant Huyeden is the guild that oversees the western city of Minami, so she's basically the leader of the West. Apparently, she had won the favor of the nobles in Minami, eventually using their wealth to buy the cathedral, similar to what Shiro did with the guild hall. After gaining enough authority over the adventurers, she ordered all of them to join Plant Huyeden. She had come to Akihabara to request that Shiro join her also. It's revealed that both parties have been keeping a close eye on one another. She obviously knows about the magic that he had created to save Rundle House, while he knows that she's the one responsible for restarting the transport gates between cities, but they're still kind of unstable. Not only that, but Malves was also working for her in their little stunt to undermine the Round Table. While talking, she exposes that Shiro has been researching a way to get home. He can't prove that he's found a way back yet, only that he can make somebody disappear. She points out that if he joins her, then he would have way more resources available to him to accelerate his research. The offer is rejected by Shiro, but this just makes her want him even more, and that's all we get from that. After the credits, we see that Shiro and Reagan are up to something and plan on leaving Akihabara. I'm going to be doing the next season, and you can find that in the left side whenever I'm finished with it, or you can check out all the Log Horizon recaps in the playlist on the right side. You can also find the links in the description below, and the only thing I hate more than intros is outros.